Welcome to our panel, Alumni Wisdom, Job Searching in a Recession, featuring a group of talented Grinnell graduates who found themselves searching for jobs, internships, and related experiences both during and following the financial crisis of 2008-2009. Before introducing our moderator and panelists, it's important to note that this event is the result of a collaborative effort among the college's Alumni Council, the Office of Development and Alumni Relations, and the Center for Careers, Life, and Service. Our moderator for this panel is Phillip Hales, member of the Alumni Council and graduate from the class of 2002. Phillip is presently the head of internal communication at WeWork. Our panel is composed of 5 alumni, including Leslie Bleichner, member of the class of 2007, and Leslie is the Lawrence Pidgeon Director of Education Professions in the Center for Careers, Life, and Service. Joining Leslie is Chien, who's a 2009 graduate of Grinnell and has been working at Google since graduation. He's presently a technical product expert on the YouTube team at Google. Rounding out our panel are 3 graduates from the class of 2010. Jordan Levine resides in New York, where he serves as Deputy Communications Director for Energy and Environment in Governor Andrew Cuomo's office. Gillian Hemme is a member of the Piven Theater Workshop, where she directs education programming, as well as the Epic Theater program at Cook County Jail in Chicago. And Jasmine Sanchez, who works at the Women's Foundation of Minnesota as their program officer and grants manager. Now, due to a technical issue, we lost the first few minutes of our panel. We'll be joining as Leslie Bleichner shares where she was in the spring of 2009 in terms of work, her personal outlook, and what her next steps would be. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, so I was at a little bit different spot. Having graduated in 07. So I was wrapping up my second year of teaching and to be honest, had grown pretty disillusioned with that role. I loved my kids. I still am in touch with so many of them today, but I hated grading. I hated faculty meetings. Like there were just so many aspects of my role that weren't feeding me and weren't fueling me. But I knew that the one thing I did know, so there are a lot of things I didn't know, but the one thing I did know is that I wanted to work with young people. And so that felt really daunting with the recession. I was in Boston at the time, and my family was in Oklahoma, but returning home did not feel like a viable option. So I really reached out to my Grinnellians, to my people, and I lived in Chicago as for a brief time when I was a kid. And as you all, I'm sure know, like a ton of alumni relocate to Chicago. And so I visited one of my best friends over my school spring break and had a quarter life crisis in her living room. But like spent time and just fell in love with the city. And so it was contract review time at my school. I decided not to renew my contract. I applied to graduate school only in Chicago. I applied to Northwestern, DePaul, and University of Chicago. Got into all 3. Chose DePaul because of their mission and their commitment to social justice and just like being really active in the city because that was something that I was missing in my teaching career that I wanted to get back to and like really be in it. And so. But grad school is expensive, and so I couch surfed for a while, and then ended up taking over a sublease of a Grinnellian. And while I was going to school, I worked at Starbucks and loved it. Actually, I could work part time and get benefits, and so I paid my bills, but then got to kind of recenter and look at like what I wanted out of life as I was pivoting out of my classroom.
Thank you. And I think, you mentioned graduate school, which is a nice segue into the next question, which is really around skill development. And I wonder if others, can weigh in on, if there were gaps relative to where you thought you might want to go or just what you thought you might be missing. What did you do to fill those and sort of work on professional development or, more formal acquisition of skills and expertise? And I'll let anyone jump in.
Yeah, I can jump in. So I remember, I think maybe 2 years after I was done, I was living in Minneapolis, and then I was thinking about like what does my future look like, and I was like, I think I was homesick, so I decided to move back to the LA area. But then eventually I applied to grad school and moved back to the Twin Cities. So I think for me at that time, I was thinking, well, like I am a young person working in the nonprofit sector. I feel like I don't have the skill sets to acquire, to like be a leader one day in the sector. And so I decided, let me look into programs that are specific to working professionals, because I was not about that GRE life, not about that standardized test life. No, that was a no for me. And so I'm glad that I found a program here at Hamline University where I was able to, so it's a master's in nonprofit management program. So that's an option, FYI, everyone on this call. You don't have to, be in academia to get your master's program. And I love the work that we did there. It was really practical. So for me, it was like really practical application to the work I was already doing in youth development. And then from that, I just again built a network, connected to a mentor in the program, and then from that was able to find opportunities, right? More opportunities, which led into youth development work, to then finance work, to now philanthropy work. And it was all thanks to, again, the social capital that I was able to leverage and connect to, and build and sustain relationships, which I think is really key when you're looking for employment in this time. And so I think that degree helped me give me some practical skills, but it also connected me to people that I would have never been able to connect or access. So it was 2 intense years of my life working full time and then going to school part time. But I'm glad I did it, and I'm really well connected now with leaders in the community, and I bring an amazing aspect to the work that I do, right? Knowing community, knowing the detailed work, right, that happens on a day-to-day at a nonprofit organization to now fund nonprofit organizations across the state.
Yeah, and I think just to piggyback off of that, it's so important in your first job out of Grinnell to make sure that you're in an environment where you can be nurtured. The work you're doing may not be what your degree is in. You may think, oh, this is below me. But I think the most important thing you can do is just have a good attitude, do everything that you're told and do it well, and more responsibility will come. But just by observing what other people are doing and asking questions, I have learned so many lessons and, been able to jump into jobs and know what to do down the road just by watching people in my first job and taking in everything that I could like a sponge. Like having those mentors, sitting down with people that you meet through the job and just like talking through them over coffee and, figuring out what they do, how they approach it, really learning those workplace skills. I think that's so critical and so important, because the thing about a Grinnell education is we can write, we can think critically, a little bit hard for us to get into the workforce in the first place, but there's so many people who don't have those skills, and we tend to get ahead because we're able to write, we're able to ask questions, we're able to learn quickly, right? But understanding those basic things about surviving and succeeding in a workplace, I think that's so important, and being in a place where you could be in a positive environment and gain that is the most critical thing you should be looking for in a job right now. Look for that opportunity to grow and to be nurtured.
One of the skills I learned during that time where I was looking for a job, like I knew I was just going to be sitting around looking for jobs when I got out of school in the summer, but one of the skills is definitely just how to be scrappy. Like, don't be afraid to be scrappy to get a job. You have to be creative. So some things, I got one of my first internships at Grinnell over the summer by just cold emailing some alums on the Grinnell directory. And there happened to be one in the Bay Area that was willing to trust another Grinnellian. So other Grinnellians are definitely friendly. I was out in the Bay Area, and back then, like, admittedly, the career development office wasn't as robust as it was back then as it is now. Like, we didn't have any of these events, but there weren't, and a lot of the jobs were focused in the Midwest. So I was scrappy, and I had a cousin who was at UC Berkeley, and I took I borrowed his login and password and used their career site and try to apply some jobs that way. And like Jordan was saying, like, you might, whatever first job you get, like, it is, the first job you get is not the most important one that's on your resume, but it is important in terms of whatever job you take. Like, it's important to have a purpose when you're there. So even if you're there and you like you don't, if you're in an entry level position and you want to evolve into like a project manager or something later on, like take that entry level position and focus on that one skill you want to develop, focus on that one marketable skill that might be useful to that you can translate to another job later on. And yeah, it's just, be scrappy.
Yes, I'd like to piggyback on the scrappiness. I too cold emailed an alum off of the alumni listing, Jen Salt's class of '88, who was the executive director at Piven. So I started interning there right after my first year and stayed connected in the Chicagoland area. Every time I would go home, I would volunteer, I would stuff envelopes. Not that you have to do free labor for 8 years to get a nonprofit job necessarily, but you just don't know what the entry point is for making connections that could blossom into something more. And I also think it's an opportunity to try different skill sets on when you're in a job, especially I think in a nonprofit where it's a little bit all hands on deck and a lot of people do a lot of different things. You might end up doing some marketing without formal marketing experience because there are only 2 full-time people. So there are opportunities to develop these other skill sets, and you might realize a passion that you didn't have previously. And there can be opportunities for you to, again, connect with your Grinnell network on plans, just a plug for plans, on ECN. Grinnellians are really kind to each other. And if you go to an alumni event, you're going to get a lot of love. And seriously, people do want to help out and connect you. I think I don't know if it's the kind of person that's attracted to a Grinnell education in general, but there's this love of connection. And I don't see that in my friends' undergraduate institutions. They're cool, but Grinnell has something really special, so take advantage of it.
Yeah, just really quickly, because I want us to move on and continue to get good meat. I will say that Grinnellians are everywhere, and you will find them in very unexpected places. And so in grad school, I was in quarters. So in my first quarter, was working, and I was a very proud posse pluser. And so I had on a PPR t-shirt and was just working, and the Chicago posse office just happened to be down the street. They came in for a coffee and they're like, oh, cool, PPR, like, where'd you go? Like, Grinnell, like, oh. And so there was like, do you know so-and-so? Do you know so-and-so? Oh, we do. And then like, they kept coming in and having conversations, and I would also encourage you just to be bold. And I did, I got to know people's coffee orders, just saying like, hey, like what's like, here's my life, here's where I'm at. Clearly, I do not want to be like the next like queen of Starbucks. Are you hiring? And I just asked that question. And so I would really also encourage people to be bold and ask for things, because the worst thing that somebody can tell you is no, or I can't. But the best thing that can happen is absolutely, or I can't, but I can connect you to somebody who can. And just to echo what my fellow panelists have already said, Grinnellians have such big, open, encouraging hearts. And so again, if that person directly can't help you, 9 times out of 10, they know somebody who can and are more than willing to make that connection. So be bold, rep your Grinnell swag or your posse swag or like whatever, because you never know how that can start a conversation and where that might lead.
That's great. So I will walk through a couple more of our prepared questions, and we've gotten some submissions from our audience. So thinking again about the past compared to today, what are some of the similarities and differences that you all have seen? You think about the recession, 11 years ago, and how COVID's kind of showing up economically and in the labor context today.
Yeah, I think for me, what I
No, Jasmine, go ahead. No. Go ahead and start.
Okay. What I'm noticing is that for sure, I think people are not, as you're stepping into environments, right, either be it corporate, be it nonprofit, be it whatever sector, technology, I think that people are not I think people are not going to accept, right, mediocre policies that don't really support diverse candidates in the work that they do. I think that people are going to hold these. I feel like I think about the work that we do and the policies that we've created over time, right? It was a commitment from our board, a commitment from our trustees, from our executive leadership that said like we have to change the practices and the way we're supporting, especially if we're trying to get more women of color in philanthropy. We have to change those practices and policies. And I quite honestly think that this is a time where a lot of the either are people my age or people that are younger are not going to step into spaces and not push back. So I think that's one way. So I think corporations, entity, government has to be responsive and has to co-create a culture that's not just in the best interest for their assets and their stakeholders. Like, it really have to think about centering the experiences of those that have been pushed to the margins over centuries. And if that doesn't happen, I don't think that young people are going to want to work with them. They're going to probably end up creating other career paths, right? And so I think that that's key. Where I feel like in 2009, I think we said, oh, we're going to fix things, and nothing, like institutionally, things did not shift. So I think that this is there's momentum to change, to make drastic changes. I am really excited for that, for you as young people on this call to ask really hard questions, even though you're off, like, ask those hard questions and try to find work that's obviously mission aligned to like your own values, right? Because you will find that place. It may take some time. So for me, like, I didn't find that space until now, and it was what 7 years after graduating from Grinnell. So it takes time, but I think that, like, as you step into different work settings, like, you'll get to figure out like what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy, and then you're making space for the things that like you really value. So I think that that's the difference I'm seeing right now. And I'm also seeing, I know there's going to be a shift with the gig economy. Like, it's not going to go back to the way that we were accustomed to, right? And so I don't know what that means for recently graduate students, for students that are still at Grinnell, but that's something that this is a space and time for us to be creative, right? And so I think that that is also really exciting. It's an opportunity, and so I don't know what that means, and I'm hoping that like I can contribute to that, and all of us on the panel can contribute to that in some way or the other, and then obviously our peers that follow behind us will definitely have that opportunity to create something new.
Yeah, so I'm going to cheat a little bit and like rep my like CLS hat along with my alumni hat. But I think one of the key differences between 2009, 2010 and now is one, like, young millennials and Gen Zers are so much savvier at technology and the internet and all this. Like, it's been central to like who you are. And I remember when like Facebook was like the Facebook and it was only like EDU folks. And so I think that and also like echoing what Jasmine said, like, organizations are being more creative in how they outreach to people, but like job seekers and internship seekers and folks that are just wanting to connect are way, way more savvy. They're using Twitter, they're using Instagram, they're using LinkedIn, and so repping CLS, like, tap into LinkedIn, tap into Grinnell Connect, tap into Handshake, call us, email us, we'll get you on there. And you just have access, and you're so much more comfortable and have so many other natural skill sets that folks just didn't have 10 years ago. And so I think that makes this time really exciting in a way that innovation is going to show up and be the great equalizer among a lot of people, because you all have those innate talents.
And just to jump off of that, I think it's so important to think really meaningfully about your online presence right now, both for better and for worse. Because for me, when I'm hiring, one of the first things that I do is I will go and Google someone. I will look at their LinkedIn page. I will go and look and see what's out there about them, right? Because, they're showing you their best in their cover letter and their resume. You never know what you're going to find. So I think, make sure that you have a robust presence on LinkedIn and really use it. It's a tool that I wish that I had, because it's such a great way for me to go and look at companies companies, and then figure out who I know who can connect me. You know, now there's a news feed, so you can figure out what are the trends in the industries that you're looking at. There's so many valuable tools, and if you can afford it, I'd even say sign up for the premium, which adds additional features that are helpful. But just be really thoughtful about, you know, trying to get your portfolio, what you're good at, out there on the internet, but really be careful to make sure that it's all positive as much as possible. Yeah.
So really good questions coming in. You know, one of them has to do with additional education. And so this submission says, you know, I've heard it's better to have work experience prior to going to graduate school, but right now, given the economy, you know, the best option is to go to graduate school. I'm wondering how people can navigate the job search for graduate school without having much work experience. Leslie, I might have you start with this one.
Yeah, I think that the different factors that go into like whether I should go to grad school, like whether I should like pursue a job like right out of undergrad. And I still think like external pressures aside, that's a very personal choice. I know and have coached and counseled folks that like going straight through grad school without that added quote unquote life experience worked out really well for them because they were able to connect to other folks in their program to have that experience and ask different questions and bring a different perspective to that education and to that classroom that folks who have been working don't have. And flip-sided, right? Like I could, like the conversations and the reflections and the papers and stuff that I wrote in my grad program looked very different because I had 2 years of experience and was also like pivoting a little bit in my career versus some of my peers who had gone straight through. And so I think what's most important is to really sit and think about what's important to me, what are my goals, and what was the outcome of that goal, but also like what am I bringing to the table? I tell students all the time, you have the skills, you've been building the skills, like your life doesn't start post-graduation. Like those internships you have, the volunteering that you do in town and on campus and in your home places, the conversations that you have, those are all skills that you can draw upon in a graduate experience or in the workplace. And so I think it's a matter of going internally and clarifying those, what's pushing you in balance with external pressures. Like I don't want to minimize that, but I think that there are pros and cons to either path, and you just have to check in with yourself and feel good and confident about which other path you're going to take.
Jasmine, do you want to weigh in on this too?
Yeah, I debated for a long time whether or not to go back to grad school because I was just like, I'm done with academia, I'm done with thinking hard, like give me a break. And so I think, Leslie, you're right, like it was such a personal choice when I chose. It was 4 years after, so I went back to school 4 years after I graduated from Grinnell, and then graduated in 2016. And I'm glad I did that because I felt like, oh, like had I not worked, I think there was a peer that started with us in our grad program, but she was just like, she had just graduated and she could not, you know, really see the connection, right, to the things we're talking about in class. And I remember being one of the youngest people in my program. So I really appreciated going into class spaces where like some of my peers were in their like 60s, you know, 50s, 40s, 30s. And so there was an array of people in the classroom, but we brought different lenses to the work, which I think is really needed, right? And I loved it. I mean, it was hard and I was like, you know, I'm networking. This is really practical for me. And I needed some time after I graduated from Grinnell to go back to school, and I'm glad I did because I think that helped me really appreciate the work I was doing in grad school.
I was gonna say, just from talking with friends who went through that path, like one of the top things I tell people is make sure you go to grad school for the right reasons. Don't just go to grad school because you can't find a job or because you don't have anything else to do and feel stressed that you can't find something. Don't go because you want to collect a degree. Like make sure you go for the right reasons. Like it has to be, if it's a path that you wanted to pursue already, like maybe then yeah, maybe it makes sense. Maybe you accelerate the plan and go pursue that first before getting some work experience. But you know, don't just get a master's for the sake of getting a master's, because then you're just going to end up with student debt after a few years. So yeah, it's personal choice, but make sure you go for the right reasons. Yeah.
I would say too, if you're looking at grad school in the arts and theater, don't pay for it. Don't. It's really hard to recover an MFA unless you're a lottery winner, really. Make sure that you're getting support, whether you're as you have a position as a teaching assistant. Be really careful, and if you're going into grad school in the arts too, think about the people you want to work with. Spend time researching the professors because ultimately those professors that you work with are going to be the ones that connect you in this field specifically, but I'm sure in other fields it's the same situation where you want to work with the scholars that are excite you and will help you evolve into the thinker that you will be at the end of the program.
So a question here about the recruiting process in the context of COVID. What do you think recruiting for the next summer's internship and full-time jobs will look like? Will it be conducted completely online? And I know, as I'm getting ready to start my new job in a couple of weeks, I think it's going to be very much an online onboarding experience. I'm excited to see how it goes. But I actually saw in my network on LinkedIn a member of, I think it was a Barclays or one of the banks, their summer class, basically going through the onboarding experience, but really going through the whole program online and virtually. So I definitely think that it'll be mediated that way. I imagine there'll be some pains in terms of trying to get it right, but others feel free to weigh in terms of what you've seen in that context.
Yeah, we definitely onboarded 2 new staff members since we started working remotely in mid-March. And so we are a culture, like the former president that just retired in December created this culture of very integrated work, right? So we're always in meetings, always, working with other teams in the organization to get the work done. And remote working wasn't really something she liked. I think she's older, and so we have a new president now, and we had no choice but to do remote work. And so I think that that's going to give us an opportunity. So I think about the peers that I work with. Some are working mothers, some are taking care of their parents, and so I think that affords the flexibility, right, and makes it a little bit more equitable, right, for some individuals to enter the space. And it was weird to kind of, I'm not going to lie, to step into a team where you have never been in a physical space with them before. But I mean, I think consultants really are have that experience. So shout out to consultants who already know how to do that and navigate their own work in this way. But I mean, it is different, but I think again, it affords us an opportunity to reimagine how we do work across sectors. And again, that's so exciting. And I mean, I think for us, we're getting the work done. People say you can't get work done at home. We're getting it done. It feels different. And sometimes there are days I wish I wasn't working at home, right? And not stressed at home. I want to relax at home. But I think that we'll find ways to navigate that, and knowing that COVID is not short term. Now we're seeing this is going to be, we're in it for a while, right? So that's what I've seen on our end.
Yeah, I think that's right. I have a couple of friends who've started new jobs during this, and it's certainly a challenging experience to onboard when you're not in the same place as anyone else. But I think, Cisco WebEx and Zoom and all of these other services, Microsoft Teams, have come such a long way since we entered the job market, where it's really feasible and possible now. And before my current job, I was working for a tech startup. We were in offices all around the country. I never met a lot of my colleagues, but we were able to build friendships just through video chat and talking over the phone. So it's certainly possible. I just think it's incumbent upon you to really be proactive and try and get that time on the calendar with people, and let yourself have some small talk and some chit chat, and it doesn't have to all be business, right? Because you get that time naturally when you're in an office, and I think that's one of the most valuable parts of an internship. You have to go a little bit harder when you're working remotely, but I think it can totally be done, and I'm seeing people do it.
So with everything that's going on right now, from a public health perspective and certainly politically and culturally, what advice do you all have in terms of how to reach out while being sort of sensitive and aware of people's emotional well-being when you're making personal connections?
I would say definitely don't be offended if it takes a while for someone to respond, or if they don't respond at all. Like I've definitely lost some emails from, recent graduates in my inbox, and then, they might bump it like a few weeks later, and I feel really bad, and then I'll reply to them even faster. But just know that with everything going on, like it might take some time for people to respond. And it's usually not personal, uh, and like as mentioned earlier, where we said like, the worst thing that can happen is someone says no or something. Like it's don't approach them respectfully, but like it's okay to reply a week later and be like, hey, uh, you know any updates on that, or did you see me? Could you take a look at this email, kind of thing. But I think most Grinnellians are pretty good at being aware of, you know, uh, all the social things going on in the world, that they know how to, yeah, just be sensitive and respectful when you approach someone.
Yeah, I think this time more than ever is really important for not only for you to express compassion to yourself, but also just to express compassion towards others. I think one of the things that the CLS, when we sent out a message to students yesterday, I don't know, time is weird, is that we can't divorce ourselves from our work. At the end of the day, we wear a lot of hats, but we are people under those hats. And I think that's important, not only a self-reflection, but those in which you want to reach out to and you're trying to connect with. And so, um, just like connecting to one another's humanity, seeing people for who they are, and not just what they can do for you, I think is really important. Um, but continuing again, that self-compassion, I think one of the things that like builds resilience when you're job searching or internship hunting, when like the world is on fire, is that there's that internal pressure of wanting to produce and wanting to succeed, and all these predatory capitalistic terms, if I can go there. But like important to rest and important to like reassure yourself that like, no, like I am good because I need, and this person who I want to know and want to learn from and grow from and connect to, and this opportunity is going to help me be a better person, but I have things to add to the table that are also going to make like my organization better, this person better, etc. And so I think if we lead with that, and connect to one another's humanity, I think that'll go a long way. And continue to push. I like Rex's recommendation of like being persistent. I think you can do so compassionately. And so there's that like, hey, I know there's a lot going on. I wish you and yours love and light, but I just wanted to check in, like, when's a good time for us to connect? I can be flexible, and those sort of things, so that you can, again, reach your goals and objectives, but do so in a really humane way.
So if you think back about, if you think about your career journey close to graduation, or in the intervening years as you've navigated it, what are one or two things that you might have done differently, or nothing, if there's nothing at all?
Yeah, I think I would have liked to have started that trajectory with asking for more help. And I say this because I think culturally, like being the eldest sister in the family, like I felt like I couldn't ask for help, etc. But I think it's really key. This is the time where you can ask questions, or you can ask for help. And again, you have this big community of alums that are, again, happy to answer questions. And I think that that's something I wish I could have done a little bit more of. I did it in my own way, but I wish I was like a little bit more like, I asked a little bit more in times where I knew I needed help, but I was like, like I told myself I didn't. But that's personal work that I'm working through too. So that is something that I wanted to share. And again, continue to leverage your social capital, right? So I appreciate the feedback around building relationships, being compassionate with people, and I think that that's really important. And I say this because, again, you don't want to come across as someone who's just, again, reaching out for a very transactional ask, because at the end of the day, if you're trying to connect with someone who knows other people, then that gets around too. So again, lead with compassion, lead with understanding. And I think for me, like I didn't realize at Grinnell that what my assets were not so much in academia, but they were in emotional intelligence. and how amazing that has helped me along the way. And so again, if you feel like, oh, like I'm not doing so great in academia, like my grades are not the best, like why is this so hard? It's going to be okay. Quite honestly, no one looks at your GPA unless you're going right into grad school. No one really looks at that. No one's asking you for your GPA. Nobody cares at the end of the day. So I would say be kind to yourself now at Grinnell. Ask for help from your peers, from your advisors, from anyone you can talk to, or as alums visit campus, and then be kind to yourself and know that you may not have certain strengths, but you have other strengths, and like identifying them and naming them and owning them, I think is also key as you go along the way of like self-discovery and then like job exploration.
Yeah, real quick advice I would say is that I wish I knew earlier was to have a smart have a smart resume. Build your resume early. Make sure a lot of people review it. Because I looked at my original college resume just last week after hearing about this panel, because I still had it on file somewhere, and like comparing what it looked like then versus now, like was like jarring. Because so build a smart resume. Make sure that that whatever's on there, whether you're a barista or you're an intern or working on projects at Grinnell, like make sure that it shows impact, like whether that's measurable numbers or metrics that show it. Make sure that whatever's on there, shows impact. Ideally, a lot of companies now are data driven, so just having something there, smart resumes.
I might disagree with that. I feel like, especially right now, when people are applying for so few jobs and there's so many resumes coming in, especially a lot of people who are coming right out of college, it's hard to set yourself apart and it's hard to get out of the pile right now. So I think more than ever, really going back to your network and, as Rex said earlier, that hustle. I think that's the thing that's most important, right? I think for the people who are on this WebEx, once you get into an interview, you're going to excel. The hard part is getting out of that pile. And if someone says, I can vouch for this person, I know they're good. For me personally, and I know for a lot of others, that goes such a long way, right? Like having that personal recommendation, having that personal touch from someone that you know and you trust is everything right now. So really trying to find those little ways that you can open up doors for yourself and then show off your assets, I think is so important. And along with that, doing the little things, when you're going to an interview, make sure you dress nicely, make sure you're prompt, make sure you send a thank you note. There's so little room for error because things are competitive right now. Make sure that you're not setting yourself back and you're doing all of those things that will help put you in a place where you can get that job. And I think the most important thing right now is to take a deep breath and to exhale. I remember all the pressure that I was putting on myself. I wanted my first job to be my dream job. I'm really proud of where I am, and I think me from 10 years ago would agree, but I could have never predicted the path that I took to get here. So I think, really just relaxing right now. I know it's so stressful, it's so hard, but understanding that your first job doesn't decide the rest of your career, and you may have a roundabout way to get there, but you will. You just have to be patient, and that's the reality of recessions. It may take a little longer, but you just have to stick with it, be scrappy, be gritty, and things are going to work out.
No, I agree. You're right about the resume thing. I would say it's more like set your resume up to succeed. Like you don't want to have a bad resume. When they're sorting through the pile, you don't want to be in the first pile that gets sorted out because it's a bad resume.
Yep.
I'm hearing this really lovely language of bravery and putting yourself out there throughout this conversation too. And I think that's something I wish I had done earlier was take more risks earlier. And I think I do a good job of saying no to opportunities for myself. But I encourage myself and everyone to let other people say no to you. You keep going, keep like auditioning for 7,000 commercials. If that doesn't teach you rejection, I don't know. But just put yourself out there, and I think the Grinnell community does a really good job of giving you a boost and reminding you that that you have a space and a voice and a value. If whenever someone does say no, there are people to support you to keep trying.
Good. So I know we just have a couple minutes left, so I will turn it back over to Mark to close us out.
All right. Well, great. Well, thank you so much to our panelists. I hope you can envision a raucous Grinnellian applause in the background right now, this virtual just hooting and hollering and whistling that's going on. But thank you to all of our panelists again for taking the time to share your wisdom with us. And thank you again, Phillip, for doing a great job of moderating. Again, the session is recorded. I'm hoping that it's recording, and we'll get it cleaned up and posted on the CLS YouTube channel. So for folks that were unable to join us. But I also just want to acknowledge that this was a joint effort by Alumni Council, the Development and Alumni Relations Office at Grinnell, and the CLS. This is a great example of multiple stakeholders coming together to support our community. It's a challenging time right now, but there's so many quotable quotes that were shared today about hustle and staying scrappy and just staying positive and taking time to take care of yourself, and those are all really, really important messages that I hope that our attendees take to heart, because it's sage advice. These are folks that have walked the path and navigated some tough times before, so please take their wisdom to heart. So with that, we will wrap up right at 4 o'clock. Thank you all again for joining us. Be well, be safe, and thanks again. Take care.